My name is Lilia McEnany, and I am an assistant curator at the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture. And as you all know, we are here today to chat with Adrian Standing Elk Pinnecoose. So a few things before we start. To begin, I'd like to briefly acknowledge the place where this conversation is happening, even though we are in a virtual space and not physically at the museum today, in Ogopoge within the Tewa world. As a non-native person living in so-called Santa Fe, I am a guest in the ancestral homelands of the Tewa people. And I wish to acknowledge all of the indigenous folks, Pueblo, Navajo, Apache, and so many others, past, present, and future, who walk on these lands and steward these places. So for those of you who do not know, the Goodman Aspiring Artist Fellowship was established at MIAC by Dr. and Mrs. Connie Goodman, who are members, friends, and wonderful supporters of the museum. The fellowship is designed to provide financial assistance to up-and-coming Native artists who show promise and are eager to move to the next level of their career development. Goodman Fellows have often opened doors to Goodman Fellowships have often opened doors to other opportunities, such as artist residencies at the School for Advanced Research or the Santa Fe Art Institute, invitations to markets, as well as gallery and museum exhibitions. So as you all know, this program with Adrian is the third in our new lecture series highlighting Goodman Fellows. These conversations typically happen the fourth Wednesday of every month at 10 a.m. So keep an eye out on MIAC social media accounts for future dates and programs. So with that, I will hand it over to Adrian.
Hello, good morning. My name is Adrian Standing Elk Pinnecoose, and I just want to thank Lillian for that awesome introduction. And of course, the MIAC for hosting these conversations with my fellow fellowship recipients and future fellowship recipients. This is an amazing opportunity for anybody to get involved in, to apply to this fellowship. This is a great opportunity for individuals and emerging artists to help them advance their career as they are just moving into what they want to start, what they want to move forward in. And the Goodmans are such an awesome individuals to put this fellowship on. And this fellowship really helped advance my artwork and really accelerate it in ways that I couldn't imagine. And it really opened a lot of opportunities for me. And I got to work with a lot of great artists. I got to collaborate on many projects, and I'm really thankful. And today I'm going to be talking about my process and my work and what I have been doing in this past year and what I plan to work on in the near future, as well as give you all a inside look at the programs that I use creating my work. I specialize in digital artwork, so I use a lot of digital applications creating my artwork, such as Photoshop, Illustrator, Rhinoceros 3D, as well as using different digital fabrication methods, such as 3D printing and laser cutting. And I will touch base on that in the presentation. So let's get started. So my name is Adrian Standing Elk Pinnecoose. Thank you for joining us this morning. I am Diné and Southern U. I have a Bachelor's of Arts in Architecture and a Master's of Science in Architecture and Computational Ecologies from the University of New Mexico. And I started to do my artwork in the digital realm. That's where I focused on creating my artwork. And it really has allowed me to explore different art forms and really evolve my voice as an artist. And I really enjoy creating different artworks for everybody to engage in and look at. So my method of process that I design my work and create my work is graphic design, laser cutting, and 3D printing, where I prototype my jewelry and then from there we cast it into silver or gold. And I use a lot of generative design, computer computation to create my artwork and digital fabrication. I started using this with my artwork when it was like a segue from my undergrad and master's program. I really began to incorporate these two ideas to create my artwork, as well as my identity. Since my artwork can sometimes be a hot topic and like a conversation, because some individuals believe that it's almost taking the easy way out in creating artwork. And I don't believe that, because there is a lot behind closed doors that happens with digital generative design. There's a lot of underlining of how much goes into creating the artwork. And I feel that it takes just the same amount of time to create these pieces as if they were handmade. They basically are handmade, because in a sense, it's not just pushing the button and saying they're done. There's a lot more from start to end. And I want to incorporate my identity within my artwork. And this particular piece, my great grandma weaved, and growing up, this particular design has always been a part of me. And you could see this design in a lot of my work, in a lot of my graphic design, a lot of my fashion that I've incorporated in a lot of my jewelry design, and how I facilitate this design in my overall aesthetic and style. My academia has really taught me how to incorporate my interdisciplinary into my work, and to really understand and focus my process. And I'm really thankful for my undergrad and graduate studies to really allow me to really understand my process and how I go about creating my artwork, and to really develop a vernacular language that I could create a strong foundation to really facilitate my overall design aesthetics throughout my entire field of artwork. It has really taught me how to really deconstruct and analyze where I want to go with my concepts, and how I put them back together, and how I reconstruct them, and really to analyze every point of view to make sure that I'm able to facilitate all aspects of my work, to make sure it has a strong message behind each piece. And not only that, that I create a sense of engagement with my work as well. And that's one of the main aspects that I love to do while I create my work, is to really have that sense of communication with anybody who studies my work, who enjoys my work. And that's one of the aspects that I love to do while creating my artwork. And with my studies, it allowed me to analyze how I start my artwork, from whether I take inspiration from the sky, from a message, from different elements that are all around us. I really want to make sure how I deconstruct that one concept, and how I'm able to incorporate that language into my work. And my undergrad and graduate studies has really helped me focus on understanding how to develop my thought process, and how I am able to apply that into creating my artwork. And as well as that, I was able to focus on visual communication, And in our studies that we had to create these boards to really illustrate our points of view and our concepts in a clear direction, that they had to be able to illustrate our ideas without us being there to communicate them. So that is a very fundamental feature that I carry with myself while creating my artwork, that my artwork is able to stand alone on itself without me being there to talk about it. And visual communication is very essential to creating my artwork, that it creates that sense of engagement and that visual stimulation to anybody and everybody who enjoys my work. And I really enjoy that. One series before I got the fellowship that I'm briefly going to talk about is my Echoed Beauty series. It was a series based on memories and dreams, and I'm going to briefly talk about how I deconstructed that thought process and how I was able to come up with analyzing all the pictures and all the graphics and how I went to breaking down each of the elements. So this is a piece that I created. It was called Forged Beauty. You could see it behind me, also on the screen. And this piece was based off of memories and dreams. And it had 132 images layered on top of one another. This is the image, or the image of my mother's squash blossom. And I really wanted to bring that memory into light of when my mom created this piece and how I went about using this memory in my artwork to facilitate that thought of the sense of movement and motion. And so how I went about creating the piece, I broke it down into 4 quadrants. And from there, I picked out 4 points within each quadrant and multiplied each quadrant and zone by 4. And I used the number 4 a lot in my work, because 4 represents the 4 directions, the 4 seasons, the 4 stages of growing up. And I really wanted to incorporate that element in my work. And so I really picked out that 4 and 4 and 4. And then from there, it evolved into this image of layering work. And from there, it really created this whole entire image on its own. And from that, you could see all the layers it created. And like, everybody sees something differently when they look into this piece. And every time I look into it, I always see something different. And I really love that sense that everybody always sees something different the more you look into it. And with all the layers built on top of each other, you can begin to see different images start to move. And it really gives this sense of emotion within the piece of itself. And from there, I overlaid it with some different geometry. You can see as it begins to build and build. And then after that series, I was awarded the Goodman Fellowship. And with the Goodman Fellowship, and it allowed me to purchase a 3D printer. And that same year, I was also awarded the Swire Fellowship. And I was able to combine both of them to get the 3D printer that I wanted to help create these projects that I had in mind, and really start to develop another skill set within my work. And here's the piece, the first piece that I used with the 3D printer that allowed me to create this 3D texture on top of my graphic. This graphic has over 75 individual 3D prints that took about over 100 hours, I believe. And from there, we overlaid each individual piece with silver. And from there, my friend helped me anchor every single one of them into pinpoints. Here's the 2D graphic. Fast forward, here it is. So here's the anchor points that you could see where each of the 3D prints were overlaid on top of the graphic. And these allowed to put the graphics on. So this 2D graphic was printed, and then from there, the 3D prints were anchored into the 3D graphic, and it created a shadow box. So I'm going to go back to these ones. So from here, you can see the curing process of all the silver pieces. Here are the 3D prototypes before they had the silver overlay. And then here is a snapshot. But since you're here in my studio, I will also be giving an in-depth look at the program that I use to create all these 3D forms. So you get a little sneak peek of behind the scenes. So from here is the digital field that I created all the 3D artwork and overlaying and designs for the piece. So as you can see, created different elements of seeing how these would anchor in, narrow, wide. And we printed each of these different prototypes. The 3D printer allowed to print different testers to see which ones worked and which ones didn't. And you could see the vector line work underneath, and from there, was able to angle it and see it into 3-dimensional form. Here's some more dowels. You can see there's pointed, non-pointed, solid, and this really helps understand which ones worked and which ones didn't. And then you can see the evolution of some of the 3D prints on where it first started from here, then how it grew into this one. And how I put together, there's different elements. First, it starts as a flat 2-dimensional piece. And then from there, I extrude it and make it into a 3D form and build the different design elements into the 3-dimensional form. And here you're able to see how that 2D graphic was flat at first. And from there, I was able to extrude it and make the different 3D forms and embellishments for that 3D overlaying graphic. So the 3D printer really allowed me to accelerate my artwork and take it into a whole nother direction. And I'm really thankful for the Goodmans for that opportunity. And that was one of my first shows, was the Native Treasure Show. So with my fellowship, I was also offered a free booth at the Native Treasure Show, and that allowed me to network and get my foot in the door in a sense, and allowed me to show my work to the public more. And I was able to participate in other shows after that, such as Swaya, the Autry, and the Herd. So this piece, I did receive the Innovation Award at SWAIA, and I also got honorable mention at the Herd as well. And with receiving the SWAIA Fellowship, I was also got to be able to participate in the fashion show in 2018. And I incorporated it using the laser cutter. We cut out these individual pieces with the laser cutter, and we also added 3D elements as jewelry onto some of the garments. And as you could see, this was my first segue into incorporating 3D printed jewelry. And from there, I was able to start evolving my work and understanding how to go about 3D printing my jewelry into silver. Then over the past couple of years, I've had the great opportunity to work with my family, Samuel LaFountain, my great cousin that really helps me out in my work and helping me finish my work. I've also got to be a part of working with Cody Sanderson for the past 3 years, who has taught me a lot about understanding how castings work and how jewelry elements work. And earlier this summer, I started working with Candace Johnson and really understanding even more the fundamentals of jewelry design and being a part of his process and creating artwork. And I'm very thankful for these opportunities and collaborating with my family and my mentors and people, and letting me be a part of their vision. And it's allowed me to accelerate my own vision of creating my work in using generative design and 3D printing my jewelry. And here's a snapshot of how I incorporated that rug design and that traditional Navajo textile within my jewelry, and how I'm able to take that design, turn it into a 2D graphic, and then turn it into a 3D element, into wearable jewelry. So from here, I am going to show you some of the work that I've created using Rhinoceros 3D. You could see that I am using that same geometry. So this is like a fast forward picture of the process on how I create some of my jewelry. So taking that same element of that traditional textile there and how I manipulate it and start forming it, creating the band and arraying it along this line. And from there, I started playing with the idea of turning it inwards and angling it and adding different elements to highlight the bracelet, overall design of the bracelet. So you could see I started cutting the design feature along the center, then adding some design elements underneath the bracelet as well. So this is just like a snapshot preview of my design process. And then here are the different forms of the finished bracelet. So after the bracelet is formed, then I turn the bracelet into a mesh one. So it creates thousands and hundreds of little individual surfaces along the entire form. And this really creates a solid volume over the 3D design. So instead of having, say for instance, you could see just one poly surface, you have hundreds of surfaces. And this really creates a smooth surface over the entire piece. this is just one of the steps in creating and finalizing the piece. Sometimes there's different places that break in the mesh that have to be repaired before printing. And then from there, I take it into the 3D printer. And here you could see all the different supports that get printed onto the 3D print. Okay, so from there, I am going to show you one of my new pieces that I will have available for market. So the 3D printer that I have is a Format, and it prints the print upside down in a liquid resin. And it cures the resin upside down. It bounces a laser off a mirror, and it cures the liquid resin layer by layer. And so you can see this is an example of some of my new work that I have been creating. And this is printed in a wax resin. So this could be casted straight into silver without creating a mold. So majority of my work gets molded, and then from there it gets casted into silver. But some of my new work that you'll have to wait to see for market does not allow to be molded and had to be straight casted. And that was one of the key features of 3D printing. As you can see, and these are my new Metamorphosis Butterfly earrings that will be available for Indian market. So from there, from designing the 3D print from the program, I want to say, depending on the complexity of the design and the final design on how it wears and how it is able to be casted and formed, some of the prototypes I go through may be from a 10 or more before I finalize. And then from there, there's all these individual elements of the supports have to be casted, or not casted, sorry, clipped off. And then from there, they had to be filed down for a smooth surface. And from there, it has to be casted with the lost wax casting. And then from there, another hand finishing each individual piece. So it's not a one and done process using 3D printing. There's a lot of hands-on in finishing each of the pieces. And here I could show you how these get printed layer by layer. So that prints it upside down. Then as it pulls the build platform out of the 3D printer, you can see how it begins to grow the 3D print. And the blue is a cross section of the 3D print itself. And I'll show you my butterfly. This is my Metamorphosis Butterfly. And here I left in all the all the before and after and all the iterations of some of the butterfly and how it evolved into its final form. So you could see how I began to draw out the two-dimensional line work and start to angle it, and you could see that it's just a solid form. There's nothing fancy about it right now. You can see how it began taking its shape, playing around with the orientation of the form. This was an earlier design. It's another iteration. You could really see how far it's evolved into its final form now, and you can see I began angling it even more. I changed the design layout for the connection for the earring hook or for the pendant design into all the elements of the wingtips. Some more different angles of it evolving, and then figuring out how to keep the form bold but light enough for an earring, and then just begin to see I start to hollow it out. And then its final form. So this particular design I started back in December, and it was taking me to summertime to finally finalize the overall design. Let me just show a little bit. And you could also see that I scaled it down and made some smaller ones. Here is some more as well. This is a new, so this particular design came out in the 2018 Sway Fashion Show. And now I finally have the understanding on how to create it and advance the design aesthetic of its final form. And you could see how far it's evolved from 2018 to now to 2021. I've added a lot more design features on it. I hollowed it out. I've learned on how to learn weight and comfortability and what works and what doesn't work. And here's just a little snapshot of some more designs. That I am working on. And with this program, I'm also able to scale and look at ways of incorporating the designs into jewelry. So for instance, this particular design, I want to be able to have it as a ear cuff that could be worn as a double dangle earring, or I'm looking at creating these fun mouth cut pieces that I feel like would be really interesting to create. Okay, go back to the slideshow. And then here's some of my jewelry design that I started evolving. And there's me evolving my forms. And through the pandemic, I was awarded the Merchant Design Award for the virtual Smart Indie Market. And I was able to create all the artwork last year for the virtual market during the pandemic. And that really helped boost my design, the network, and audience. Also, I got the great opportunity to collaborate with Grayson Clothier, which is a clothing brand, and it was my first commercial collaboration to put my artwork onto their clothes. And this year I was awarded my first award for my jewelry design in the Opening Standards Award at the Herd Market. And I will touch base. I have a opening this weekend at the Gallery Hoja in Hotel Chaco. And this is my Pandemonium of Beauty series that will be on display in the gallery. And what's really fun about this opening is a artist collaborative opening that all these prints will be printed in their large size. And this is a series that I put together during the pandemic. And I really wanted to highlight a lot of colors and play with different layering and different ways to incorporate ways to make that sense of happiness and a way to get lost in another realm of looking at these graphics. And I wanted to create a sense of escape with each of them. And these will all be in their large format. And so you really get to see the visual impact of my series titled Pandemonium Beauty. And that will be this weekend, August 14th, I believe, at 7 o'clock. And I will also be at Indie Market, and I will be showing some of my new jewelry design and my new pieces that I've been working on. My booth number is on Lincoln West 738. And I really can't wait to show you my new pieces that I've been working on. And there was a little glimpse of my jewelry piece in this presentation. It was deconstructed. So if you were paying attention, you got to see my jewelry piece that is being worked on, and it was almost finished. And I would just like to give a thank you to Lillian, the MIAC, the Goodmans, for this opportunity to show you all a little peek behind my process and how I go about creating my artwork. And I just want to say thank you to my family, my friends, Sam, Yola Fountain, Cody Sanderson, Kenneth Johnson, to Cody Lafferty for all their help, for supporting me, creating my work. And I look forward to seeing you all. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that fabulous presentation. Oh my gosh, that was a real treat. You know, the Forged Beauty piece, that was the first piece of your work that I had ever seen. So really seeing your development as an artist from then until now and until what we're going to be able to see in a few days at market is so exciting. So thank you again for a wonderful presentation. So while we are waiting for some questions to come in, I will ask my own questions. So we've talked a little bit about this, but I think it might be really interesting for the audience to hear more about how your training in architecture impacts your work. It's very clear visually, the aesthetics of it make a lot of sense that you come from that architecture background. But if you can talk a little bit more explicitly about that relationship, I think that would be great.
My study in architecture is really understanding it was like my thought process and how I go about creating my artwork and how to really analyze my concepts from A to B and how to from start to end. And it really helped me focus on understanding my overall design style and my identity and how I integrate my culture into my artwork and to make sure that I'm able to integrate both the past, present, and future in my work. And I really want to highlight that within my own design. And as I move forward as an artist, I really want to be able to open the doors for anybody to use these digital applications or digital fabrication with their own artwork, that there is a lot more that goes into creating these pieces.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So I guess, I mean, just your technique and your methods and your inspiration are so unique. I'm wondering what you experience as the most challenging part of this work.
I think overall is learning the programs. It's taken me throughout my entire, I say, my school year, learning these programs and how to go about understanding how to begin to see my ideas like in my head, like, oh, wow, I want to do this, but how to translate that into visual or 3D form and to be able to put these ideas into the programs was a challenge at first. But the more that you use it, the more you understand it and the more you're able to really like advance your own ideas and see them go in different directions that you never thought of.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very clear answer. I can't even imagine. I mean, how did you start learning about Rhinoceros 3D? It seems like that's where a lot of the bulk of the work is.
It was a program that we used in undergrad a lot. We
Okay.
used it to create all our 3D models and our renderings for our projects throughout the school year. And I just used it in that way to create my artwork and my jewelry ideas. So I think one of the main difficulties was retraining my metric system from feet to inches into like millimeters to design jewelry and to think of that micro scale.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly challenging. Very cool. You know, I really loved seeing in particular the influence of textiles and your mother's, I think, squash blossom necklace. That was just really wonderful. Are there any other specific pieces that you have drawn upon or any other ideas behind that?
I also use some elements from my mother's work, for instance. Let's see,
Mhm.
I could go to that slide really quick.
Great.
My mom was a silversmith, and so I like to incorporate some of her design elements in my work as well. So with this piece,
Mhm.
I began incorporating some of her stamp styles within my work and her jewelry design. So she was
Wonderful.
another inspiration. She was one that really instilled in me the creativity and how I go to draw inspiration in creating my artwork. She really inspired me to be positive each and every day, to smile, to really enjoy life. And I really take that to heart and really want to put that in my artwork.
That definitely comes across, especially the series that you're talking about now that will be at Hotel Chaco and just kind of emanating joy in this
Mhm.
difficult moment that we're all living in. That's really wonderful.
Mhm.
We have a comment from Angela saying, thank you for an awesome presentation, which I have to echo. That was really, really wonderful. I am so excited to see your work in person, especially those butterfly earrings. I am dying to see those, especially seeing all of the different iterations that you went through, and especially in terms of weight and trying to make such a substantial piece feel light.
Mhm.
I'm so excited to see it.
That's one of the most difficult things I feel is making sure that there's not too much weight, but to make sure that the overall piece reads as being bold.
Yeah.
Mhm. And
Yeah,
so
there have been so many earrings in my life that I didn't buy that I loved because they were too heavy. So I appreciate that.
that was one challenge that took a while, but thanks for like the advantages of using the program, I was able to get them down to the weight that I wanted them to be comfortable.
Wonderful.
Mhm.
Wonderful. So thank you, Adrian, and thank you everybody for tuning in. This will be available on MIAC's YouTube channel in the coming days. So keep an eye out for that, and do make sure to visit Adrian at Market, and hopefully go to the opening at Hotel Chaco this weekend.